working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey, this is Matthew Krause, and you are listening to another episode of the podcast Working Drummer. Today is my interview with studio legend Chad Cromwell. Chad is known for his work with legends like Joe Walsh, Neil Young, and Mark Knopfler. Around Nashville, he's known for his work for other great artists like Vince Gill and Lady Antebellum. I'm super excited about this conversation. I've been a huge fan of Chad's for many years. I've met him once before, but this was a great chance to sit down and chat. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as we did. As always, go to workingdrummer.net. You can find out more information about this podcast and others. You can go to iTunes, where you can subscribe to this podcast, where a new episode will be sent to your smart device every week. You can stream from there. You can also stream from our website. I want to mention once again, we're part of the Merge Network, so I want to do a shout out to Drummer's Resource, which is Nick Ruffini's podcast, and Daniel Glass's podcast. If you haven't checked those guys out, please do yourself a favor. They're both really great. One quick thing before we get started with Chad, we were talking about all the tornadoes that came through the southeast and the damage that it did to his property and how it wiped out his barn. So we were kind of in the middle of that conversation when we start this podcast. You'll hear that and how his studio on his property came to be. So anyways, let's get to it. Here is Chad Cromwell.
Basically about a half-mile wide path that these things rolled through. Mm-hmm. And miraculously, our home stood. Everything else went down. The barn went down. One of our horses was killed in the storm. It was terrible. And then this structure that where we are now, the studio, was a garage, a two-car carport, and it just went to Kansas, just poof, and so the idea for the studio was born out of the fact that I literally had a blank slate. I had this concrete slab was the original footprint, and then I added on to the footprint after that to make it bigger. On the other side of that wall is another section of the building,
okay.
And so this place sort of came out of, it was out of necessity. I needed a studio.
That's what you were saying.
But the sad truth of it is that the garage building that was standing here, it was really problematic for trying to come up with a way to make it into a studio.
That was the original plan. You were going to use what was there.
And I was really struggling with how to do it.
And Mother Nature came up with an answer for
Mother Nature and Providence came right along. It was a very, very tough time for us, but this thing is here.
Yeah.
We're
it's amazing. It's really beautiful. Of course, you put a set of blonde Craviatos in any room, and it makes it.
Yeah, it kind of dresses the room up a little bit.
It does.
And they haven't been moved. I put that kit there almost 6 years ago.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it hasn't gone anywhere. I've changed, the symbols around and whatever, but that kit, the basic kit, there's no reason to move it. There just isn't a reason to move it. It sounds great right where it is.
That's awesome. Well, how often do you record out here?
I'm out here doing something every week.
Wow.
Yeah, whether it's I'm doing overdubs or drum tracks, file stuff for people wherever they are.
Yeah.
And doing that, I do a lot of pre-production work here.
Yeah.
I do post stuff, I'll do vocals and stuff we're producing or, developmental stuff or records we're doing, just whatever. And I'm finding that I'm busier out here than I expected to be in some ways. When I built it, it was with the idea of, this sort of thing is probably going to come in handy. It was no new thing in 2007 to have your own studio and doing file work. That was not a new concept. But for me, the idea of doing it, what was new about it for me was I was so busy in town just doing the session thing all the time.
Yeah, right.
That I just thought, well, occasionally I'll do some overdubs out here for people, and man, what a nice thing. I can kind of walk out my back door and do that. Mm-hmm. And when I initially built it, it took a minute before those calls started to come in. Mm-hmm. But once word got around that I was doing it's blossomed into some really good stuff.
Yeah.
It's
interesting because there's a lot of players that are kind of coming into the industry and finding this new way of recording. Mm-hmm. The technology has made it so convenient for people to create stuff and pass files around and do things. And I know you say it wasn't such a new thing in 2007, but it was, technology has changed even from 2007. That was amazing in 2007.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are finding ways to they're creating opportunities from this technology that weren't there for a lot of players and players like me that aren't working on Music Row or doing a lot of studio work in parts of Nashville or any other town where there's kind of a handful of session players that do a lot of that work. But I find it fascinating that you are a busy guy. I mean, you've stayed busy in Nashville all the time, and you have for a very long time, that you're getting into this, or you've gotten into this work as well. Not out of necessity, but out of, hey, this might be nice.
Well, it hasn't been entirely out of necessity, but what has been a surprise is the shift in the volume of work that we were accustomed to doing. Because I've been here a long time and have sort of ridden a pretty nice wave in Nashville of work, the volume that I was accustomed to doing was triples every day.
Wow.
And sometimes you could carry on through the weekend, and it was just amazing how much was going on.
What years?
This was through the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, I came here in 1990, and the sort of boom was really, I couldn't tell you with absolute historical fact when the start of all that was, but I know that in the very early 90s, it seemed as if we were riding this unprecedented run of business in Nashville it was just amazing how much was happening, how many record companies were here signing acts and recording them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how many labels we had at the time. It was amazing.
Right.
And so, coming from the peak of all of that to where we are now with the whole new reality that's happening, the volume of the work downtown has shifted. There just aren't as many records being made as there used to be.
Right.
So with that comes attrition, however that plays itself out.
Yeah.
And the advent of the home studio thing became useful on a number of levels. It became a supplemental income to do just overdubs for people that needed that. And then it became a new way, a new way for Nashville to do production work. Like, maybe go in and cut your basics at Ocean Way or Blackbird or wherever.
Right.
And then, thank you very much, we got our rhythm tracks. We're going back home now to finish our record.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing radically changed the way the studio business operates. It radically changed the way the session industry rolls. Lots of in-house rigs like this have had an impact on the cartage companies that count on delivering gear every day to studios, So just across the board.
Years. You haven't needed them in 6 years here.
Not that kit.
Not that kit.
That kit will never move. I got a bunch of kits down at Drum Paradise, but that kit will never move.
Right.
I don't think. Well, I don't know. I might change it around at some point, but I've just had. I'm not bored with them yet.
No. I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's just interesting how things have shifted and the pros and cons.
Yeah.
And how being able to create on your own, how that's shifted the landscape.
Oh yeah.
And I find over time when I talk to a lot of players who are doing sessions or working, when it comes to the overall music industry, they don't really know what's going on. They're just doing the work. So, I mean, like you say, you know, I can't tell you when it started in the 90s or when it peaked or when it was. I'm just working.
Yeah.
And going, you know. And you've adapted to the changes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things I did that was indirectly a plan, I suppose, but oddly, I came to Nashville from Memphis, that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
But my career was based then in L.A. and the West Coast.
Yeah.
And so I was commuting from Memphis to L.A. or San Francisco to do the bulk of my work, and then occasionally I'd come up here for something, and then I would do whatever there was available to do in Memphis, right?
Yeah.
So when we decided to come here, I really didn't have like a set plan. I just knew that I was going to come here and attempt to be a full-time session guy. Now this is coming off of, you know, I was what I was accustomed to prior to being here was making a record and then going and subsequently touring and supporting that record. And I did that with a couple of records with Joe Walsh. I did that with records with Neil Young, Jackson Brown, Bonnie Raitt. I mean, a lot of different people. That's how I understood the ebb and flow of the business to be.
Was that, you think that was pretty common across the board for most
players? When I was working in L.A., I wasn't part of the film and TV industry. I was a band guy, you know. So my deal was about, we got to go make a record, and then the record gets done in X amount of time, and then okay, I'll see you in whatever 5 months or 4, whatever it's going to be. We're going to go tour.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that was what I understood as the normal way to go work.
Right.
So when I came here, I remember sitting down with Harry Stinson.
Yeah.
In 1990, and I called him and asked him to go to lunch with me, and he was a sweetheart, man. And so we went and had lunch, and you know, I just said, well, I'm here. What do I need to do? You know, I've got this resume, blah, 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 you know, and what do I need to do here? And he just said, you know, man, take as many meetings as you feel like you want to take and give as many tapes out as you feel like you want to give out. But he said, man, what's really going to happen is you've got to go through the process of being here, determined to be here.
Yes.
And the community has got to see that you're in for the long haul.
Yeah.
Because there are a bunch of guys just like you that have moved here for the same thing in mind, making a living in Nashville, doing sessions, right? And so align yourself with whoever you dig in town, make friends with people, and eventually and he said, I can't tell you when that's going to be,
right.
You know, but eventually you will get a phone call. Somebody's going to give you an opportunity, and then it's your door to walk through, you know.
And this, you took this meeting in 1990.
In 90.
So at that point, you had quite a resume built up.
Yeah, yeah. And I knew better than to think. I didn't come here assuming that I was just going to show up.
Yeah.
And
play with Neil Young.
Yeah. That I knew better than to think, well, wait a minute, because that kind of work doesn't go on in the studio that much here. You know, that the sort of stuff I was doing wasn't as common at that time. It was the mainstream country industry that was the bread and butter of the session work, you know.
Yeah.
And I knew better than to assume that I would just start working.
Right.
But what I was not prepared for was how long it took to start working.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was, man, that was a very sobering period of time. It took almost 2 years to start getting a call, like to getting phone calls, you know, to do sessions.
What happened during those 2 years that led up to those regular phone calls? Do you remember doing anything specifically?
I remember hanging around at the house that we had just built a lot. You know, at the time I was smoking cigarettes, and I did a lot of smoking cigarettes and looking at my backyard going, how in the hell am I going to pay for this now? You know, because the phone is not ringing.
Yeah.
I'm not on the road with anybody. I had just finished touring with Joe, and that sort of, we were done, you know, and that was kind of over with. And I thought I was going to pick up one more tour with him that would have padded me for a while, but it didn't happen. And man, I sat here, honestly,
wow,
and depleted my resources, and waited and waited and waited, and you know, just hung in there, basically. You know, I did have people that were pulling for me. Michael Rhodes is a bass player here in town he was one of the guys that was really influential in getting me to move here.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, because we had met prior to my getting here, and we played well together, and we became buddies. And
where did you meet him? How did you know?
I met him on a Warren Haynes session up here at Westwood Studio. And it was kind of impromptu. It was just the three of us. We got together and just started kind of jamming, really. But we played, and that connected. And then he came down to Memphis and worked a bit. I got him down there on a couple of things, and we just stayed in touch. And it was just one of those things where we knew we had business to do together. You know, we knew that was going to happen some way.
Right.
But he was the driving force because he was already pretty well established.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Was he already doing it?
Yeah, he was working a lot for the guys. You know, Barry Beckett was his, you know, guy. And, and so at that time, you know, Michael was right up in the middle of what you would want to be doing here. And he really encouraged me to make the move and the change. And so he helped me. You know, it still took, but it took, you know.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, and Michael still is in it. You know, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, but it's just interesting to know kind of where you were in those 2 years and the connection with Michael. And for players that are maybe just trying to survive through their 2 years or getting through that period of time, is there a Michael Rhodes in their life?
Hopefully so.
Is connected somehow. You know, and has their finger on the pulse of what's going on and winning over having those people on your team. You know, kind of.
That's right.
Anybody else like that?
Oh yeah. Most definitely. As we're talking here, there's there's two guitar players, Richard Bennett and Kenny Greenberg. And both of those guys were like, Richard was very early on. Well, Kenny was actually the first. He and Wally Wilson were producing a Joan Baez record.
Wow.
And ironically, as everything works out, Kenny really liked the way I played eighth notes on Rockin' in the Free World on that record. And he found out that I was here. And he wanted to use me. So I can't tell you why that connects with making a Joan Baez record, but that's what happened. And so Kenny hired me for, I think that might have been the first like proper record I did here, you know.
So you were saying, like, I'm not going to just assume that, hey, look, I've played with these people.
No.
But it did help you in that sense.
Ultimately it did. But I didn't expect that to be, this is going to bust the door down as soon as I get into town. Yeah. I didn't know how any of it was. Obviously, I couldn't have known how it was all going to work out. But ironically, that's how that worked out.
Yeah.
And so I got work from that. And then Richard Bennett, I'm not quite sure how he got wind of me, but he did. And Richard hired me, and that sort of started the ball rolling in the more of the country world here, because Richard was producing Kim Ritchie and George Dukas, and so that's how I got started with Richard, among other records. But that's initially how we started. And then Tony Brown was the first established main, like really big time Nashville producer guy.
Yeah.
He was the first one of those cats that called me.
Okay.
And he couldn't have been sweeter to me.
I want to back up and kind of get the backstory of up to 1990, if we can.
Okay.
I do. What year was I Hope You Dance, Leanne Womack? Do you remember that? That was 90s?
Yeah, that's, man.
The reason I bring that up is my dad bought that record.
Uh-huh.
I didn't own a lot of country. I was still living in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I saw that record, and I was like, I'm really curious about Nashville. And so I just combed over those liner notes, and that's the first time I saw your name.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I stole that record from my dad, and I still have it, and it's great. It's a great record.
It is a great record.
Yeah.
We cut that at the old RCA studio.
Okay. That was the first time I'd heard of you.
Yeah.
And I was just curious where that falls in that timeline.
I want to say that record, that's like 95, maybe 94,
Okay,
95, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Early mid 90s.
Yeah. So kind of early, or just getting started. You're probably in full swing, I'm guessing, in 95.
By 95, 95 was the first, 94 was good. 93 was actually good as far as getting started.
Yeah.
But 95 was like kind of the watershed year where I felt like I'd found my place here.
Yeah.
And I was getting calls from people that, like, who's that guy? Oh, well, who's that? Let's give that guy a go, So I was getting those rings and just doing fun stuff and interesting, for Nashville at the time. We were in the midst of some change, musically,
Right.
and things were starting to get more pop and rock, and different influences were coming in, and edgier kind of stuff. Right. And so I was really fortunate to be here to jump onto that, because I knew a little something about it. Yeah. With my background that I had. So.
Right. Well, that's what I want to get to, is that you talk about having these opportunities to work with people, or a guitar player or a producer, and there's something about what you're doing that's catching their ear and saying, hey, who is this guy? And so word's getting around about who you were and what you were doing in the 90s when you first moved to town. But what can you tell us about what led up to the 90s? I mean, what's your background that maybe gave you the way you play, your approach, your ability to record, be a drummer in the studio, and as opposed to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that goes.
And I don't know if it goes back to.
It goes back to
where
Memphis.
You were born.
Oh no, it definitely goes back
or where
to
you grew up.
Well, Memphis is where I grew up, and from the time I was 3 years old on.
Yeah.
And there are two guys that taught me the method of recording that I wanted to have to make a living playing drums. And the two guys that really taught me that, there were guys that came before them, but that taught me about playing and being a great live work and learning how to do that. But the serious recording bit, the two guys that were the most influential in my life were Bobby Manuel and Jim Stewart. And Jim Stewart was the founder of Stax Records.
Okay.
And his partner in a production company that was post-Stax era, just post-Stax.
Okay.
His partner was Bobby Manuel. They started a new production company that Atlantic Records funded, which is a whole other story, but there's a lot of history around all of this. There's a guy called Jerry Wexler from back in the day, and Jerry was the guy who made Muscle Shoals in Memphis happen, okay, from the business record company standpoint. And so I was trained by those two guys in the school of Al Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, that, I mean, really, that's really what it all watered down to. You want to do this for a living, here's what you do. And they threw me out on the floor. I was a kid, you know.
I was going to say, when you say school, I mean, like, how do you approach this situation?
You get to be, I was lucky enough to get to be allowed to sit in the control room. Al was gone. I mean, Al was dead by now. But I got to be on sessions at this studio, and I watched these men work, and I got to ask them questions, and I got the opportunity when no sessions were going on. I was the beneficiary of Bobby going, get out there on the kit, you know, and just let's get a groove going and start playing. And, you know, I'd start playing, and I would think I'm, you know, really dialed in and grooves happening, or we're rocking, you know, and he'd go, you're slowing down. You're speeding up. You're slow. I mean, you know, and I couldn't tell. I just wasn't burned in yet to really feeling groove. And they just hung with me, you know, and Bobby especially. And I just last week did some overdubs for him. He sent me files up here.
Wow.
And I haven't seen Bobby's face in 25 years.
Wow.
You know? And so full circle, you know. He sent me files to do, and he just goes, man, I want you to do this for me. And he called me Sunday and left a message, and he goes, you got it. I don't know what I taught you, but you got it.
That's awesome.
I mean, I almost started crying when I got to listen to the message. Because that was, if he says I'm grooving, I believe it, you know. So those guys, and this is like late 70s, early 80s.
Can you remember something that they told you, like, was, I mean, you're talking about tempo.
Yeah.
Are there any other things you can think as far as, like, touch, approach?
Consistency, you know, velocity, consistent velocity of hits. That was a big thing. I remember it was an old MCI console in their control room, and I remember we would sit there, like I would go and play, and I would come back in and I would watch the VU meters, like this on the snare hits, and I could see, you know, just slight changes in the velocity, you know. So we would work on consistent placement of the notes.
So that was late 70s, very early 80s.
Yeah.
And you were still in Memphis.
Right.
How do we go from there to
here?
Touring with Neil Young and
well, Joe Walsh is well, actually no. There was two steps in that chain. The first step is Nico Bolas. For those of you who don't know who Nico is, he's just a brilliant recording engineer from Los Angeles. He's recorded umpteen amazing records out there that we've all, I mean, millions. These records have sold gazillions of copies. So
you know his records for sure.
Like Don Henley building the Perfect Beast. That's among many others.
Okay.
So anyway, Nico was a staff producer at a place called Record One in L.A. for years, and then left to go independent. And his first independent engineering gig was this record in Memphis that I played on for this guy called Rob Junkless. And he was a new signing on a label in Manhattan. Rob wanted to make his record in Memphis, and this is how this all came about. Yeah. So I met Nico we became really close friends. I actually sublet a bedroom out of my apartment downtown to him, and we just hung out all the time, for 8 or 10 weeks.
Wow.
We became really good friends.
Yeah.
And maintained that to this day. And around that same time, Joe Walsh was coming in and out of town in Memphis, and was dating a girl who happened to be the best friend of my wife.
Wow.
Who then was not my wife.
Okay.
Okay? But we met via, my wife at the time co-owned a studio in Memphis where I worked. This is how goofy the music business really is, And so here's this romance going on over here. And then, Joe, however it worked out, I met him one night in a bar. He was hanging out with his girlfriend, and decided I got the idea, wanted to jam. So we ended up back at my now wife's studio.
Yeah.
And her husband, they all came down, opened the place up, and off we go. I'm finding myself, okay, now I'm jamming with Joe Walsh. Now, what the,
Yeah.
what's next, So I've made this Nico connection over here on Rob's record, also done in the same studio that Joe was hanging out in.
Yeah.
So that connection's been made. Now I've got this other connection in L.A. made with Joe. And a few weeks after he left and sort of went on his way, I got a call from his tour manager saying, would you be interested in coming to Austin to play some? And I said, absolutely, I'm in. So I'll go to Austin, and I'm thinking we're going to go do. We did this gig in Dallas. It's like a roadhouse. I don't know what was going on, but Joe was a guest DJ down there at the time, and the bass player, Rick, the bass player, the two of them were really great on radio shows. So they were guest DJs for a week. I show up at the hotel. I get with them to do this gig. When are we going to rehearse? We'll rehearse tomorrow. Well, tomorrow comes. Nothing happens. When are we going to rehearse? Well, a week goes by.
Yeah.
And then finally, as it turns out, I got to go to L.A. and play at Irvine Meadows for a big KLOS annual party, birthday party, whatever it is. It's like 15,000 people. And Joe's like one of the headliners.
Oh.
And I've never played a note with Joe, I've never done a full show with him.
Right, aside from that jam.
I've done jams and stuff like that, but like proper. And so my burn-in with Joe was literally walk on cold, and play a show. That was 86.
Were you just guessing what he might be playing?
I had tapes of live shows.
Oh.
So I had basic outlines of the music. But you know what this is like. I mean, it's one thing to play cold. It's another thing to rehearse.
Yeah.
But I got through it, and that became a lasting relationship.
Nice.
For quite a number of years. So 86, I'm working with Joe full time.
Yeah.
And so my life is beginning to change as a drummer. I'm starting to make what I call a real living, and things are starting to happen a little bit in Memphis with a few dates. I'm starting to get more calls to do sessions there. And then I get a call from Nico, and this would have been early 87. And Nico says, Neil's got this thing he's trying to do, and it's not working, and you're the guy. You got to come out here and do this. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's a blues band. And it's like he's tried everybody that he trusts, and it's not feeling right, So I finally got him to give this a try.
Yeah.
So you're flying to L.A. and you and Rick, the bass player with Joe,
Right.
you guys are we're gonna play in L.A. So I show up and I go to SIR in Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's not a studio; it's a rehearsal hall.
Yeah.
Well, the A&M record plant or the A&M Records, whatever, A&M remote truck. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay.
Is parked outside. It's they've created a full-blown studio inside one of the rehearsal studios, you know? And I walk in this room, there's, a bunch of people, and it's a big band, a bunch of horns, it's a big band. And I'm kind of like freaking out, it's like, man, I'm getting ready to play with Neil, and I didn't know what at all to expect. And then Neil walks up to me, and he comes up to me. He's got shades on and a hat, and he holds his hand out, and he goes, "Hey, I'm Shaky," and that's how we met, And I didn't know who Shaky was. I do now. Shaky's we all know who Shaky is. He's whoever Shaky is that day.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Shaky that day was this blues guy, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so we started playing, and man, it rocked.
Wow.
It happened. And we cut that record in 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
I mean, it was live, so there wasn't a lot of.
Did you have any material, as far as this session goes, did you have any material before that? Were they just teaching you the songs as you went along?
Oh, I had no preparation for that.
Yeah.
It was, we were learning, we were running and gunning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nico is who facilitated that.
Gotcha.
So from a couple of different directions, that's how the LA thing kind of started to happen. Then a Jackson Brown relationship came out of that.
Yeah.
Bob Glaub, the bass player, a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young record. Bob was helpful in getting me on that. It was just crazy. It's word of mouth and,
Can we go back? I don't want to rehash certain things, but I want to kind of figure out what it was about your playing that made these opportunities fruitful.
Groove.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not chops.
And
because I'm not that kind of player. I'm really not. I'm a single stroke, pretty fundamental kind of player. I really am. I'm not a.
And was that a decision? Was that just based on influences?
Well, remember when I got to work with Bobby and Jim,
right.
The question was, can you make me a great drummer? That wasn't the question. The question was, can you teach me how to make a living in this business?
Yeah.
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 And so they pretty quickly broke me of trying to blow chops and I took that to heart. Because I was really into the prog rock thing and back then. I mean, I was way into Yes and Genesis and Gentle Giant, on and on and on and on. Yeah. I was really into that stuff.
I read somewhere you're a Bill Bruford fan.
Big time.
Yeah.
First Yes record is one of the coolest records ever made.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about that record is how groovy it is. I didn't know it at the time. I wasn't smart enough to know that at the time. But Bill was playing great grooves along with the technical stuff he was doing. He was grooving his ass off. Mm-hmm. And so, that meant a lot to me. While I'm in the bedroom practicing with my headphones on, trying to work out Bill's parts.
Yeah.
He was grooving.
Yeah.
Right. So that. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it leads me to something that happened to me relating to you. Like I said, I moved here in '99, and one of the people I got to play with is a singer-songwriter from California named Susanna Springs.
Okay.
And you were on a record of hers, I think 2004.
Uh-huh.
And I only did a handful of shows with her, but I told this story a couple times. I don't even know if I've done it on the podcast. But I've relayed this epiphany that I had. So it was probably 2005 or so, shortly after this record came out.
Mm-hmm.
She was covering a lot of songs from that record, and we weren't passing around MP3s. It was, here's some CDs, I'll meet you at your house.
Yeah.
Learn these songs on this record, and here's 3 other CDs with some demos of new songs that I'm working up. Great. I, again, open up the CD. I'm going through the liner notes. Who's on this record? I'm trying to wrap my head around and become familiar with who's what. You know, who's playing guitar, who's playing steel, who's playing drums, of course. And I don't remember seeing your name, but when I saw who you worked with, and I'm like, that must have been who I saw was Chad. Because here's what happened. I'm writing the charts out and trying to get a feel for learning the songs. And the songs on her record with all these players that I had recognized, I don't know if it was Paul Franklin and you or whoever, that I'm like, oh, I get it. It fits the song so well. Mm-hmm. I already know this song.
Yeah.
The groove is there. The parts are there. There's this transition into the bridge, so maybe catch this push here or there. But all the parts are there. Made my job so easy. I just really had to embrace the feel of what you had put down there. Mm-hmm. Then I go to the demos that weren't of the same caliber of the master record that she had out, which made sense. And I'm not sure who played on it or what. But these players had chops.
Yeah.
And played some kind of cool things from a drummer standpoint. But man, it was a pain in the ass to learn those songs. And that's the point where I thought, I think there's a reason why Chad was hired to play on this record, and maybe this other player wants to be doing these masters records, and he's trying to show people what this is. I'm just assuming, but he's trying to show people, the producer or the other musicians, what he can do around the drums. Yeah, but it doesn't fit the song. Right. And I had a harder time with those songs than I did the other ones. And it was because the part, that was the epiphany I had. Because I'm thinking, how do guys do this? How do these players that I look up to are playing on all these records that I'm listening to? And you were one of them, and continue to be that. And I hear this simplicity, and I hear not only that, but the right part for the song. And so maybe an extension of that would be my question. How do you guys come up with the right part with when they play that song for you in the control room, and you have to walk in there and play it right the first or second time? It's not about playing the simple parts. I mean, yeah, it is about, the feel, the groove, everything. It has to be precision. Yeah. But what's even more so impressive to me is that the right part, the right kick pattern, the little things. Yeah. That works.
The best way I know, there are a lot of different ways that comes to be. But the best ways.
Don't say Memphis, because
I'm not going to do that.
I can't change history.
That's right. No, what I was going to say is there's a structural way that you can go about doing that, and that is with charts and usually, like, if we're making a record for somebody, then there's a demo, the same demo you're listening to, right? And so we've got to. There may be specific things about that demo that the artist and producer want to have.
Still.
Okay? Yeah. So that gets written in. Yeah. That's just automatic. You write it in. And then you go and you play that. But what I find, and that's great. That's a perfectly normal,
it's part of the process.
Very much so, yeah. And it's very common. Yeah. But what I find, the records that I get the most excited about playing on like that are the ones that are literally a musical conversation between the guys that are playing. So it becomes our experience with that music, as a band.
Yeah.
And that, if we catch it right, nobody's thinking really. And so how do I tell you what to play when I don't even know what I'm going to play in 8 bars from now?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, the basic framework of what I'm going to play is whatever the pattern, the fundamental pattern is there. But the little corners turning and the way we rise to the chorus or the way we fall to the, whatever, the breakdown, that stuff, I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, this happens, I know I've laughed about this with Peter Frampton before because when I record with him, one of the things that he likes is the fact that I never do it the same way twice. That might not be everybody's cup of tea that way, but that's something he likes. So and that's the way that I play. It's real instinctual, and it gets back to, I don't really have a technical explanation for what I'm going to do.
No, but I understand what you're saying, and there's an element of improvisation.
Absolutely.
That's there.
And
if you're
and the unknown, and that's the place to be. That's where I want to be. Yeah. I don't want to be, oh, okay, I've got a dotted quarter note, and that's going to tie to an eighth note, and we'll do the eighth note push, and it'll be exactly that way every single time we do this right here. That kind of structure, I can do that and have made a living, and I'm happy to have made a living doing that. But if we're talking about getting in the zone and getting into that place, that is, I mean, I just don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I swear to you, I don't know what that is. It's like standing on the edge of a very, very small branch that could really be disastrous at any second, and that's my favorite place to be.
But when it's happening, it's really happening.
Oh, fuck yeah. When it's really, really happening, you are in the zone. You are, because you're doing music with God. Nashville's still a rhythm section town, but it is most definitely more influenced by loops, grid, electronics. That's definitely a much bigger role in the way they're making records in town right now.
So how does that affect your approach to?
Well, I mean, it depends on at what stage when I get called into play, what stage of the process is the record in?
Right.
I mean, if it's a track guy producing it, he may only want me in there to cover some fills and get some samples and, some cymbal crashes, or I don't know, just whatever. Maybe mess around with some grooves.
Yeah.
But as far as structure goes, song structure, give me some verses. Give me a half a dozen choruses, whatever. And that's kind of it,
So you're playing like a chorus by itself, and they're going to stitch it together?
Yeah, it's literally, where it's you're not necessarily going in there counting the song off and playing it from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you do, you might do a couple of passes like that, and then invariably they'll ask you, well, hey, would you mind doing the verse one more time? Maybe change the fills a little bit, and give us some options for drum fills, or give us some snare drum options sonically, that kind of thing. Right. Now I'm talking about track stuff.
Okay.
Now if we're talking about programmer stuff, if we're talking about rhythm section stuff, then we're still
counting the song off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still performing. We're still getting drum sounds.
Right.
Traditional recording session guys, everybody, reading over the charts, listening to the demo. Mm-hmm.
I'm working with a friend of mine where he's sending a demo track my way.
Yeah.
Vocals and an acoustic guitar.
Uh-huh.
No bass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes no vocals.
Oh, sure.
They haven't finished writing the verses yet.
Yeah.
And there's just like a little bit of a hook, and they're singing a word and humming the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trusting me to come up with something
Yeah.
that the bass player will lay down later.
You know what you're doing. You're framing a house, musically speaking.
Right.
And that's not. I'm not saying that in a disparaging way.
No, I know what you're saying.
It's just the practical.
Mm-hmm.
That's the job assignment. You know, I get those all the time. You know, and it's just okay. Well, I got to put a drum track on this for them to build on. You know, that's all it is.
Right.
And you really can't. I mean, you can certainly try to bring your best stuff, but that's not a musical conversation. You know, that's not possible. So it's a structural, compositional way of doing music, which is perfectly valid, but it's not in the room together.
That's just the nature of the way people are producing music.
And you know what, man? Part of the reality of that is budget. You know, budgets are down, so it's not solely like, oh no, we like electronic music. We want to do electronic music. It could certainly be that, but it could also be, and is very commonly, here's the budget. How do you want to make this record? You know, there are track guys in town that can give you really great sounding tracks.
Yeah.
All sequenced, every bit of it.
Yeah.
You know, and it'll sound exactly like that, but it's, you know, and they can do that for you at a radically reduced price relative to what it would cost to hire a whole band and a studio and blah, you know, on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So there's financial consideration in all that now too.
Yeah. What advice would you give to young players, and what advice would you give to experienced players?
Experienced play? Oh, wow.
Okay, so when I say experienced players, someone like me that's been playing for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
But still, I'm trying to learn every single day, and I could use advice.
Yeah, okay. The thing that I would tell young cats is you got to find your peer group in this. You got to find the people that are just like you, looking to make something happen, because collectively you will. You know, in your own team, you'll come up with your own way of doing it, your own language, and it's just a question of putting yourself in out there, get in the middle of what's happening, and connect.
Yeah.
You know, that's essential. And then, you know, I think understand the lineage. You know, really don't, like, for example, don't come to Nashville and say that Garth Brooks, and I love Garth, I've worked for him, and this is not a critique, but don't say, I want to listen to old classic country music like Garth Brooks. No, Garth is great, and Garth will go down in the history books and all that, but let's go on back a little bit, you know, and learn something about the lineage, whether it's Memphis or Nashville or L.A. or Detroit or Philly or New York or St. Louis or Chicago, wherever, New Orleans. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Sure.
But know something about where your music comes from.
Yeah.
Really do some studying.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed how unoriginal music sounds to you if you really do some homework, because it's a derivative. We're all doing a derivative. It's just generational jumping.
Yeah.
And man, it comes from field blues. You know, it comes from this stuff is not. It's not that old. You know,
it's not.
In
the drum
big
set's
picture.
not that old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not. It wouldn't be hard to learn these things.
Right.
And it wouldn't take too much of your time to do that.
It's a lot easier to access these days than
Yeah.
it was when I was a kid.
Yeah. So that would be something I would really encourage doing.
Yeah.
And then if you're really, really serious about doing this for a living, then do it. And don't look back.
Yeah.
You know. And there will be a moment, because everybody goes through that thing where it's tough, haven't made the rent, the phone's ringing, bill collector, whatever it is, and you're still trying to make it work on $100 a night gigs on Lower Broad, you know. But if you're serious about this, you got to do it.
Yeah.
You just got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then for the older guys, man, if you're still here, I don't need to tell you anything, because you're not going to go away. You know, you're going to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's kind of I think it's more or less the same thing, isn't it? It's.
Well, yeah. I mean, all those things are important. You know, when you're saying go back, check out these things, I'm listening to every word that you're saying with that, because I don't do that enough. I mean, I have my influences from personally, 60s and 70s, and you mentioned Bill Bruford, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Right. Yeah.
But to go back beyond that, and not talking just about jazz, but about where blues and what has become pop.
Beat-oriented music.
Beat-oriented music that
Uh-huh.
Just fits the type of work that keeps me busy.
Yeah.
And the drummers that are going to influence that style.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can recognize most of the time your snare drum sound.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We were talking about, I was playing on the drive up here, I was playing for Mike this compilation Vince Gill set that I bought for my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And now I listen to it myself. And it's I think these days it's like 3 or 4 CDs that you're on.
Right.
And I'm just trying to figure out what it is that you do to get this nice. There's a high-end pop, and there's that thing that sounds really great when you're recording, and it has that really nice low-fat thing going on.
Yeah.
It cuts through the track nice.
Yeah.
But there's still a high-end thing. So I don't know if you're willing to divulge any.
Oh, sure.
secrets,
I don't know. I'm happy to tell you.
I'm
happy to tell you. It's a 5x14 Ludwig Standard from the 20s, and it's a 10 lug. I got the drum from Jim Pettit down in Memphis Drum Shop, and he really accidentally sold it to me. I don't think he ever really wanted to, but I caught him. Oh, thank you, Lord! I caught him just at the right time, and he let it go. And it's not a pristine collector drum. He had modernized it. It had at the time when I got it, it had a early 70s P85 throw off on it.
Yep.
And die-cast hoops, Gretsch hoops, and the big 60 the Gretsch, real thick. I think they're 60s.
Oh wow!
I mean, really
40s,
wide.
But okay, 60, not 40.
Yeah. And I'm using the percussion version of that now.
Okay.
Or Pure Sound, I mean.
Okay.
And they might be 42s or something. They're not 60s, but it's more or less that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what that is. That's what that sound is. And I got to tell you, man, that drum has been on almost every record I've ever done, along with other snares.
Yeah.
But that drum, it'll go away for a little while, and then it comes back. And I actually had a real scare with it last year, because along where the throw off hits,
Yes.
there were some hairline cracks between the screw holes.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to have to retire this drum. I'm afraid that I'm really going to trash this thing. And Sam Bacco built a plate to go inside that took the stress off the hole, the cracks, and then remounted. And I had Adrian Kirchler make an exact P338 or P38, whatever it is, the Ludwig throw off from the 20s. Adrian made that for me, and I put it on, and then the plates, and Sam assembled it all. And man, I'm using that drum a lot again.
Is there a head combination or a tuning?
Coated ambassador top,
Yeah.
clear ambassador bottom.
Yeah.
And the tuning usually is like medium. It's not cranked
Yeah.
real high. It's kind of medium. And it's fairly flexible, but the thing is with the die-cast tubes, it shuts down some of your overtones.
It does, yeah.
So the idea is I kind of want to let it ring because it's already shut down.
Right.
You know? And by the time the mic translates what's there,
Yeah.
and you get to the other end of it, whatever ring is there is a pretty musical one.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It doesn't take up too much space, too honky. And
Yeah.
And if you throw a little compression on that, oh, God, it's just a great drum.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of great snare drums that Adrian. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
Adrian Kirchler is he's in Italy, and go check this out. Whoever's listening to this, if you don't know who he is, just go to his website, AK Drums.
Okay.
And he builds as fine a snare drum, a metal. He's the king of metal drums. And
I love metal.
he
drums.
does all of Johnny's stuff, all the limited edition stuff at Craviotto.
Okay.
That comes out, the brass series, the copper, the hybrid, the blah, blah, blah. They've got a bronze series out now. Adrian makes all of those shells.
Okay.
He does all that work.
That sounds awesome.
Fantastic drums.
Wow.
But there's something about that old 20s drum. I mean,
I don't know what it is, man. There really is, and it's
Well, the die-cast thing is a big part of it.
okay.
But the key is finding a brass shell that will resonate the right way with the die-cast tubes, because they don't all do that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's got a little bit of mix and match and hit or miss.
Yeah. Cool picture of you with Bonnie Raitt.
Yeah, that was good.
Wow.
That was the end of a tour I did for her.
Is she as cool in person as she seems?
First time I saw her play was in Austin, and she was up and running pretty good by now. I think it was just before Nick of Time and all that.
Yeah.
That was the one, you know.
Yeah.
But she was playing. I was playing with Joe, and it was that outdoor festival in Austin, right on the river, and we got there. Let's see, how did this go? Oh, right. So Nick Lowe was also playing.
Wow.
And Nick, she was in town to play that festival at some point, and she was there to see Nick play, and then we showed up, and this was back in the day when nobody was really concerned about, you know, if you have like 40 beers instead of 2, you know, nobody cared. It was wild back then, and Bonnie had not decided to totally, you know, put it all down yet, and so she wasn't really drunk, but she was the funniest. She was just wild, man. It was like when Nick came off the stage, everybody was hanging out in the dressing room, and we were just hanging. And the thing that I remember, and because I'm kind of like this new kid in this world at this point, you know. This is 86, maybe.
Okay.
Right around in there, and I'm just like eyes wide open, and I just remember, I've never heard a woman cuss like that before in my whole life. This is unbelievably cool. I just thought she was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, you know. And she was just like a guy, you know, sleeves rolled up, talking gear, talking guitars, songs, rowdy, you know, really in the moment, funny, she was just great, and she's still great. I mean,
Yeah,
she's still the spirit of her music is just still so there.
Yeah.
You know, I really miss her. I hadn't seen her in a long time.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to make sure. I think she's coming through town this summer. I got to get down there and see her.
A lot of us have played Rockin' in the Free World. Is there something about how that came together as far as the session, or?
Well, yeah, that session was done at his barn, and he has a farm or ranch south of San Francisco, and it's up in the San Mateo Mountains, I think it's called, looking over the ocean and not far from Half Moon Bay. Anyway, there's a barn on the very top of that, and it's literally just a big barn, and they kind of converted it into like a big rehearsal space. You know, that's what we would think of it as. You know,
Yeah.
dusty floors and nothing fancy, and funky old couches, and you know, a refrigerator, and that's kind of about it. You know, and again, the A&M plant truck was there, record plant truck was there, whatever. Well, I can't remember if it was A&M or record plant, but the remote truck was there.
Yeah.
And we were mic'd up. And every day, he had this big easel set up with big magic markers, and every day we'd come in, and you know, dun, 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 dun. You know, he had this riff, and so we would just play this riff just over and over and over, and it was exciting, you know, because it just felt like, well, man, this is good. And then he'd stop, and then he'd run over there and he'd scribble a bunch of words on the easel, right? And then we'd come back, and then he'd start singing, working out a verse. Well, the song's got like 10 verses or something. I don't know I forget how many verses. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, the songs he was writing were anthemic story kinds of songs. There's another song called "Ordinary People" that appeared on just actually came out on an old Blue Notes Live record that was never released. It's out now. So that song's 21 minutes long.
Jeez.
You know, but anyway, so Rockin' in Free World is sort of in that family, and we just would work on it. We did it for days. You know, we'd hit on it for a while, and we'd do other songs too. But then we'd come back around, and each day or so, he'd come in with another verse or maybe 2 verses. So I think in the course of about a week, he had written the lyric then in its entirety.
While you guys were there playing.
Yeah, and we tracked it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The first time we played the song, I'm pretty sure it was in Spokane, Washington, or it was in Seattle. Maybe it was Seattle first. At the Paramount Theater. It was one of those. I can't remember which one was first. The first time we played the song, and when we hit the chorus and saw the reaction, we all, you know, it's like we knew. And the record wasn't out yet or any of that, but we immediately knew, okay, this one's going to hang around for a while.
That's an awesome song.
Yeah.
That's really great. That's cool.
Yeah. I'll tell you another cool thing to check out of Neil's that I'm really proud of anyway. It's a moment in time. And that was, it's another Google search for you or a YouTube search. Yeah. And this is, type in Neil Young, Paul McCartney, Day in the Life.
Right.
Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. I read about that.
Yeah. You ought to check that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul had never performed that.
That's right.
Before.
He'd never performed the song.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I think I'd heard that he had attempted to do it, but I don't know, they didn't.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that when he came out on stage, this was the last night of our tour, and it was this gig called the Hard Rock Calling Festival in Hyde Park. And man, that was a night. and this was this was it. And he came out in the middle eight, which was the part of the song that he wrote.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And when
it was between him and John, and they each took a section. Is
yeah,
that right?
well, John wrote I heard the news today, oh boy. He wrote all that stuff.
Right.
And Paul wrote the Woke Up. Cruise my hair. That was his part of the song.
Yeah.
And that's when he walked out on stage. And he was aware of the fact that we'd been performing it. He'd been hearing about it. And nice. He and Neil are friends, and they'd been talking a little bit, and it happened. So that's a...
Did people know that he was going to be there on stage? No.
We didn't even know for sure if he was going to come out until he came out. It was intense, man.
Did you have a chance to meet him afterward? Yeah.
He hung out with us for a couple of hours after the show.
That's great, man.
Yeah, because it was the last night, so they kind of set up a dinner thing back in the tent or whatever behind the stage, and we got to hang out. And he was a really nice guy.
Jeez.
Yeah.
He's amazing. I'm such a huge fan.
Me too. Well, who isn't?
I know a couple people, but
well, we don't want to know who they are.
It's amazing. Yeah, that is amazing. But...
Yeah, check that out. It's another long piece. It's another one of those 10, 15-minute things. But
you've been given your assignments.
Yeah. But but it's just all this wide open, cacophonous. When you said cacophonous a minute ago, that's what I thought about.
Jeez.
That. The cacophony in what we did with that song is out there.
I just thought of something. How do you stay sharp, not being on the road, not playing all those long sets?
Thankfully, knock on wood, the session work thing keeps me sharp enough.
Yeah.
And I'm not disengaged from live playing. I know the difference.
Yeah.
And so there's a physicality that comes with playing live that's different.
Yeah.
It's more extroverted in the way you play.
Yes.
Because you're performing. You
right.
literally are performing for people that expect you to be up there doing that. And so I try to stay sharp that way. And then the session thing keeps things going.
Yeah.
And if I feel like it's really getting funky, I'd come out here on this kit.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. If I go more than a week or two, I have to practice. I've got to do that.
Yeah.
But
that makes me feel better.
Yeah. I've struggled with. I remember I went through a period for a while there, where if I took a week off, I was worried about going back in.
That's
what it was going to feel like.
Right now.
Yeah, I got past that.
Okay.
That might just be a matter of just letting go of that thought.
You're right. I've just ordered a book that a friend of mine suggested that I've heard many musicians suggest, and it's all about that.
Yeah. For me, what it was muscle memory concern. And it's like, well, if I stand down, then if I show up and they hand me some burning chart or whatever, and I'm loose or tight and not strong to play, how am I going to get through this? Am I going to be, are they going to figure out that I'm not together? Or are they, it's musician paranoia is frankly what it is.
Yes, yeah.
And then eventually I had to stop worrying about that, because you know what? I mean, now if I lay off a bit and I go in on a date, the first 20 minutes of playing are a little. I have to be economical with what I'm doing,
right.
and then I'll start feeling the muscle burn again. And it'll all start making sense, and the synopsis are all starting to pop again and fire. Yeah. And it's just like, in an hour's time, it's like once I can start feeling a little soreness going on, it's like we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
This is all in my head. When you're in record, there's something that's supposed to happen mentally and physically with music that's elevated. The consciousness of it is elevated. And if you do it for a long time, it's sort of like tight roping. You could string up a tight rope across a cul-de-sac in my driveway to walk across, or you could put the same tight rope between the World Trade Centers, remember, that whole thing, and it's still a tightrope, and it kind of doesn't matter where you are, it's still the same tightrope. It's all good, that's a discipline, it's not the distance that you fall or any of that. Yeah, it's just here's where you are. You're right here, and for X time, you're right here. And that's, I guess that's training, I guess that's a thing that just occurs over time.
Experience.
Yeah, experience,
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah.
That book, Effortless Mastery by Kenny Warner.
Oh, okay. I haven't read it.
I've heard it. It's come up over the years a couple times. And then finally I'm like, I got to get that book.
You're going to do it, yeah.
Yeah, my wife's like, I ordered it for you.
That's cool.
It'll be here Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It's hard for my little husband brain to move forward. She knew what she was getting into.
Yeah. Of course she did. She knew before you did.
Holy crap,
yeah.
Man. That's awesome, man. Chad, I appreciate it, man.
Oh, man, you're very welcome. Thanks for thinking of me.
No, of course.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and letting us hang and come over.
Oh, yeah, come anytime. I need company.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Come on. Come, you can help me feed the duck and the horses and the dogs and the cats and
the skunk.
The skunk.
Wow. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Chad is awesome. Super sweet guy. I felt just lifted walking away from that. Great conversation. Mike Jackson was able to join me and hang out, so appreciate him being there with me. But man, I hope everyone enjoyed that as much as I did and got what they could from it. Chad's a great guy and a great player. I hope you all take some time to check out his work if you don't know it. Is Zach Albetta. He'll be doing the host duties for next week and be putting out another great podcast. Thanks again to Mike Jackson for helping me with this. I'm on the road. I'm actually recording this outro on the bus, trying to get it ready to send out today. And so help will make that all possible so we can get it out to you. So once again, thanks for everyone's support. We really appreciate it. And stay in touch, and we'll see you around. Thanks. Bye-bye.